Welcome to our deep dive into Iran. We've got this really fascinating document you sent us.
Okay.
It's labeled iranhistory.txt. It seems to be full of someone's personal notes on Iran's history and geography.
Interesting.
And it even starts with this quote from Rumi.
Okay.
It says, "You are born with wings. Why prefer to crawl through life?"
Oh.
What a powerful way to start thinking about a country we often only see
Yeah.
through a very narrow lens, you know?
It really sets the tone, doesn't it? This idea of a nation with all this
Yeah.
potential, but also facing these forces that are kind of holding it back.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's going to be a big theme as we unpack this whole document, actually.
Definitely. Okay, so Iran,
Yeah.
land of ancient empires and deserts, and this really complex modern identity.
Mm-hmm.
It's where East meets West, but often clashes.
Yeah.
So our mission today is to understand Iran,
Right.
beyond the headlines,
Right.
by going deeper into the historical and cultural forces that shape it.
Exactly. And this document seems like a perfect guide for that.
I think so too. And it starts right off the bat with something that's often overlooked:
Oh, what's that?
geography.
Oh, interesting. Yeah.
It paints this really vivid picture of Iran's terrain.
Like what?
We're talking towering mountain ranges,
Wow.
these vast deserts.
I've heard about those.
Some of them are these desolate salt deserts,
Oh, wow.
like the Kavir, and very limited fertile land.
So it's not like this lush green
No.
paradise that people sometimes imagine.
No, not at all. It's actually, the document says it's about the size of Xinjiang in China,
Okay.
but so much of it is just incredibly harsh.
Wow. That's a tough environment to build a civilization in.
Right. And that leads to what I think is maybe the most critical issue here:
What's that?
water scarcity.
Oh, of course.
It's kind of mind-boggling when you think about it.
Yeah.
How can a country with such limited water
Mm.
support a growing population,
Right.
let alone industries like oil refining, which needs so much water?
Yeah. And the document really doesn't shy away from the consequences of this struggle.
Oh, no.
It talks about how Iran is relying so heavily on groundwater,
Uh-huh.
which is leading to some serious problems, like land subsidence in Tehran.
What's that?
The ground is literally sinking beneath the capital.
Wow, I had no idea it was that severe.
Yeah. It's pretty alarming.
I mean, I've heard about water issues in Iran,
Mm-hmm.
but that really puts it into a whole new perspective for me.
And it's not just an internal problem either.
Oh,
The
right.
document mentions this conflict with Afghanistan over the Helmand River,
Mhm.
and this really shows how water scarcity can escalate into these international tensions.
It makes you wonder if that's going to become more common in the future.
Yeah, definitely something to think about.
So geographically, Iran faces some serious challenges.
Yeah.
But this document doesn't stop there. It throws in this whole Aryan myth thing.
Oh, right.
Honestly, before this, I hadn't given much thought to why Persia changed its name to Iran in 1935.
It's a question that takes us down a rabbit hole of history and language.
Yeah.
The document explains that the term Aryan refers to these ancient nomadic people,
Okay.
most likely originating in Central Asia,
Mm-hmm.
and they migrated both east and west, influencing languages from India to Europe.
So that's why we see these connections between languages like Persian and Hindi,
Right.
and even English.
Exactly. Pretty amazing to think about, isn't it?
It is, yeah. But as the document points out, there's a dark side to the story as well.
Absolutely. The term Aryan was tragically distorted
Yeah.
by racial supremacists,
Yeah.
culminating in the horrors of Nazi Germany.
Right.
And it's kind of ironic because Reza Shah Pahlavi,
Mm-hmm.
who wanted to modernize Iran and connect it to its ancient past,
Right.
adopted this term that would later be used to justify such horrific acts.
It just goes to show that even seemingly academic theories can be weaponized in terrible ways.
Unfortunately, yes.
So we've got this geographically challenged nation
Mm-hmm.
grappling with this controversial historical legacy. And then the document throws in another layer:
Empires?
empires, invasions, periods of foreign rule.
Yeah.
It's all woven into Iran's identity.
And geography plays a key role here again.
Of course, Iran's location made it a crossroads, vulnerable to invasions, but also a conduit for trade and cultural exchange.
It's almost like Iran was destined to be this melting pot of cultures.
In a way, yeah.
So the document takes us on this whirlwind tour of Persian history,
Mhm.
highlighting these three major empires,
Okay.
the Achaemenid, the Sasanian, and the Safavid.
Yeah, those are the big ones.
Each one leaving its own distinct mark.
Right. The Achaemenid Empire, spanning from Greece to India,
Yeah.
is fascinating for its sheer scale and the legacy of Cyrus the Great.
Oh, and the document mentions how Cyrus, after conquering Babylon,
Right?
liberated the Jewish people.
Yes. He even earned praise in the Bible.
Yeah, as King Cyrus.
It's amazing.
Then you've got the Sasanian Empire with its elaborate social hierarchy and its embrace of Zoroastrianism as the state religion. Right, a very different vibe.
Totally. And of course, we can't forget the Safavid Empire, whose legacy is so tied to their embrace of Shia Islam.
Which has had a lasting impact on Iranian identity even today.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And speaking of Islam,
Yeah.
that's where we see another turning point in Iranian history.
The document describes the Arab conquest and the huge impact
Right.
that Islam had on Persian culture.
So we're seeing all these layers of history, geography, these ancient myths, and the rise and fall of empires,
Right.
all shaping Iran's identity. But the arrival of Islam seems like a really transformative event.
Oh, definitely.
How did these two seemingly distinct cultures interact?
Yeah, was it just Islam imposing itself on Persia?
Right?
Or was it something more? Well, that's where it gets really interesting.
Yeah.
The document says the relationship was way more nuanced than that.
Oh.
It was this dynamic process of exchange with Persian culture influencing Islam, even as Islam transformed Persia.
So more like a cultural dance than a hostile takeover.
Exactly. A dance. That's a great way to put it.
Give us some examples, because the document mentioned a few that stood out to me.
Sure. Take, for instance, Nowruz,
Okay.
the Persian New Year celebration.
Right.
It was originally a Zoroastrian festival,
Mm-hmm.
but it was adopted by Muslims and is now this major holiday in Iran.
It's amazing how those ancient traditions just kept going.
Yeah, weaving themselves into the new fabric of society.
And another example is the translation of the Quran into Persian,
Right.
which made it much more accessible to the local population.
Absolutely. And that kind of translation often leads to deeper integration as meanings and interpretations blend and evolve.
So what we're seeing is that modern-day Iran is a product of centuries of this cultural layering, a place where East meets West.
Often with a lot of friction.
Definitely. But to really understand that friction, we need to bring the discussion into the 20th and 21st centuries.
Okay.
And that's where things get even more complicated.
Right. The modern era brings a whole new set of challenges.
For sure.
Yeah, the modern era, it definitely adds a whole other layer of complexity to this story of Iran.
Totally. But before we get there,
Yeah.
it's important to remember that labels like orphan, you know, while they're helpful for understanding Iran's geopolitical position,
Right.
they can also oversimplify things.
Absolutely. It's never that straightforward.
Right. Iran's not just defined by its relationship with the West or its neighbors.
It's got its own internal dynamics, too.
Exactly. And the document emphasizes how Iranians themselves have wrestled with their own identity.
Oh, interesting.
How so?
Well, it points to Reza Shah Pahlavi
Okay.
and his attempts to modernize Iran.
In the early 20th century.
Yeah, he was like modeling his reforms on those of Ataturk in Turkey.
Oh, wow. So he was aiming for a more secular, Western-oriented society.
Exactly.
That's a pretty bold move.
It was. And his reforms were really sweeping.
Like what?
He invested heavily in infrastructure, education.
And even changed the way people dressed.
Really?
Yeah, he banned the veil for women.
That's a huge cultural shift.
It was a radical departure from tradition.
Yeah, and I imagine it didn't go over well with everyone.
You're right. It sparked a lot of backlash.
So it seems like he was trying to bring Iran into the modern world,
Yeah,
but maybe he underestimated
I think so.
people's attachment to those traditional values.
Yeah, the document argues that for a lot of Iranians, especially those deeply rooted in Shia Islam,
Right.
these changes felt like an attack on their way of life.
It's that classic tension between progress and tradition.
Yes. Playing out on a national scale.
And it's all happening against this backdrop of global power struggles.
Right, and I can see how this sets the stage for the Islamic Revolution.
Yeah, the document really doesn't hold back on that.
Not at all. Those events in 1979.
It was a huge turning point.
They were a seismic shift, not just for Iran, but for the whole region.
Absolutely. I mean, you have Ayatollah Khomeini returning from exile.
Right.
These mass protests.
Yeah.
And eventually the overthrow of the Shah.
It's easy to see it as this sudden upheaval.
Right. But the document hints at these deeper underlying causes.
Like what? Was it just a rejection of the Shah's reforms?
It was more than that. Khomeini was this incredibly charismatic leader,
Mm-hmm.
and he tapped into all of this resentment toward the Shah's regime.
So it wasn't just about modernization.
No, it was about corruption,
Okay.
economic inequality,
Right.
this sense that the Shah was out of touch.
So like a perfect storm of social and economic and religious grievances.
Exactly. And Khomeini channeled all of that into this powerful revolutionary movement.
He had a vision, didn't he?
He did.
Huh.
He offered this vision of an Islamic state based on Sharia law that would reject both Western and Soviet influence.
That neither East nor West, but Islamic Republic idea.
Yes.
Yeah.
It resonated with so many Iranians
Yeah.
who wanted an authentically Islamic society.
Free from foreign interference.
Exactly.
It wasn't just about turning back the clock. It
Right.
was about forging this new path.
A distinctly Iranian path.
But how successful was Khomeini in achieving that?
That's a good question. Because it seems like Iran has been anything but isolated from global politics since the revolution.
It's been caught up in all sorts of conflicts and tensions.
The document doesn't go into a ton of detail about the post-revolution period,
Okay.
but it acknowledges that Khomeini faced all these challenges
Right.
trying to actually implement his vision.
I mean, even though the revolution brought about some huge changes, it also led to a really intense period of upheaval.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
We're talking about the Iran-Iraq War, right?
Yeah, that must have been a defining moment for the new Islamic Republic.
It was a brutal war lasting 8 years,
Wow.
and it had a huge impact on Iranian society.
Like what?
Well, it reinforced this siege mentality,
Okay.
this sense that Iran was surrounded by enemies
Mm-hmm.
and needed to build up its defenses.
And weren't there also internal struggles during that time?
Yeah, definitely Khomeini's vision of an Islamic Republic wasn't exactly inclusive of all viewpoints.
Right. The document mentions purges and suppression of dissent.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a reminder that revolutions often have these dark sides.
It's like the pursuit of a utopian ideal can sometimes come at a very high price.
Unfortunately, that's often the case.
So we're seeing this complex interplay of internal and external pressures shaping the Islamic Republic.
Yeah.
It's trying to forge its own path,
Mm-hmm.
but it's also dealing with the legacies of the revolution,
Right.
the war, and the ongoing tensions with the West.
And let's not forget those internal divisions we talked about earlier.
Oh, right. The document hints at those.
Yeah, but they're really important for understanding what's going on in Iranian society today.
So even within the framework of the Islamic Republic, there are all these different views on the direction the country should take.
Absolutely.
It makes you wonder if those divisions will ever be reconciled.
Yeah. Is it even possible to bridge those gaps?
It's a tough question, but I think it's safe to say that the struggle
Right.
between those who want to maintain the status quo
Mm-hmm.
and those who are pushing for greater liberalization or reform,
Yeah.
that struggle is still very much alive in Iran today.
And it's not just about political ideology.
What else is it about?
There are deep social and economic divides as well.
Like what?
Well, the younger generation, for example, they're facing a lot of challenges:
Okay, like what?
high unemployment,
Mm-hmm.
restrictions on their social freedoms.
Yeah, I can see how that would lead to frustration.
They're tech savvy,
Yeah.
connected to the outside world, and
Yeah.
increasingly vocal about their aspirations.
You like that Rumi quote we talked about?
Oh, yeah. Born with wings.
They're pushing against the forces that are trying to hold them back.
And then there's the issue of women's rights.
Right, that's been a huge point of contention in Iran.
Absolutely. The document doesn't really delve into it,
Yeah.
but it's impossible to ignore the ongoing struggle for greater equality.
It seems like Iran is this nation
Yeah.
grappling with its past, its
Mhm.
present,
Right.
and its future.
Trying to figure out its place in the world.
And it's definitely not a simple story.
Not at all.
Ugh.
It's full of contradictions and complexities.
But that's what makes it so fascinating, right?
Absolutely.
So we're back. We've covered a lot of ground in our deep dive into Iran,
Yeah, we have.
from ancient empires to the Islamic Revolution.
It's amazing how it all connects.
It really is. And this document, while it focuses on history,
Right.
it kind of lays the groundwork for understanding the challenges Iran faces today.
Especially when it comes to its place in the world.
Right. Its role on the global stage.
Yeah. And it's interesting how Iran's internal struggles are often reflected in its foreign policy.
I see what you mean.
That theme of being caught between East and West,
Yeah.
searching for its own path, but constantly being pulled in different directions.
It's like it's happening on a global scale as well.
Exactly. Trying
Yeah.
to find that balance.
Right.
asserting its independence while navigating this world
Yeah.
where these global powers often call the shots.
It's a tough position to be in.
It really is. And the document, even though it doesn't cover recent events,
Yeah.
it kind of foreshadows the difficulties Iran would face,
Right.
trying to reconcile its revolutionary ideals with the realities of global power.
Especially with all the sanctions and the tensions with the United States.
Right. It creates this siege mentality.
Yeah, like they're constantly under threat.
And that often leads to actions that are easily misunderstood or misrepresented in the West.
Like what?
Well, take Iran's involvement in regional conflicts,
Okay.
their support for groups like Hezbollah and their nuclear program.
Right.
All of these things are often seen as aggressive or destabilizing
Yeah.
without really understanding the historical context.
Or Iran's security concerns.
Exactly.
Like that orphan label just keeps coming back.
Yeah, they're viewed with suspicion.
And it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy.
It's a vicious cycle.
So if we try to see things from Iran's perspective,
Okay.
what are they really trying to achieve on the world stage?
I think at the core of it all,
Yeah.
Iran wants to be recognized as a major regional power, a player whose interests are taken seriously.
They want a seat at the table.
Exactly.
Not just in the Middle East, but globally.
Right. But achieving that goal
Yeah.
in the current geopolitical landscape,
It's incredibly difficult.
it's like playing chess against multiple opponents.
with different agendas.
And it's made even more complex
Yeah.
by the fact that Iran's internal politics are so fluid.
Right. You've got hardliners
Yeah,
and moderates.
All vying for influence.
And that affects how they interact with the rest of the world.
Absolutely.
So it's not just about geopolitics.
Right.
It's also about the lives of ordinary Iranians.
The economic challenges,
Yeah.
the social restrictions.
The desire for freedom and opportunity.
How do all of those aspirations fit into Iran's global ambitions?
That's the big question, isn't it?
It is. Because a nation's foreign policy should ultimately benefit its people,
And for many Iranians.
especially the younger generation.
Yeah.
Their interests lie in greater connection with the world, economic opportunities,
Yeah.
a future where they can truly spread their wings.
I love how you brought it back to that Rumi quote.
It's such a powerful image.
It really is. So as we wrap up this deep dive,
Yeah,
I'm left feeling both admiration and concern for Iran.
I understand that.
Admire their history, their resilience, their determination, but also concerned about all the challenges they face.
Both internal and external.
It's a story that's still unfolding.
And this document
Yeah.
really gives us some insight into the forces that have shaped this nation.
It's been a journey of discovery for sure.
I've learned a lot.
Me too.
Yeah.
And we hope it sparked your curiosity to learn more
To look beyond the headline.
and to really engage with the complexities of Iran
It's a fascinating country with a rich history and culture.
and a future full of possibilities.
That's
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into Iran.